transportation-related event, we certainly can adjust the schedule. Good afternoon, Tuesday, March 18th. Tuesday, March 18th. I hope everybody enjoyed their weekend and their St. Patrick's Day. And fittingly enough, we're going to go from St. Patrick's Day right to Patrick Murphy, who has an outstanding first name. It's shared with our youngest son.
Old, isn't it? So tell everybody you got green underwear.
We are working on the T-bill portion of potentially proposed language regarding electrify your fleet and drive electric that was discussed and requested by committee members last week. And we need to make sure that we understand what we're doing in relation to electrify your fleet and drive electric if we were to choose as a committee to adopt that language. And that's why I brought us the testimony today. So Mr. Whitby, welcome back to the chair for I'm not sure how many times this year, but we're always happy to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I am Patrick Murphy, the Vermont Agency of Transportation, but have not been called the saint. Appreciate
once a year
introduction nonetheless. So I will quickly run through sort of where we are right now with the electrified fleet, how it came to be, and take any questions. We're going to try and keep this to 15 minutes and then allow you all to hear from Dave Roberts from the EIC on their program, Drive Electric Vermont. So this was first authorized in 2023 through Act 62, which reappropriated $500,000 from the Replace Your Ride program that at that point hadn't seen as much utilization. If you remember, the incentive at that point was $3,000, but the used vehicle market being what it was in many cases just more economic to try and trade in a vehicle towards the purchase of a new or used vehicle.
So you're not up on the screen.
Sure, yeah.
I can't see that.
So I've just
You're just gonna.
yeah, I've just
Okay.
sent a
Okay.
one-page handout and yeah. We did touch on it in a couple of earlier presentations this year, but I thought we'd give just a quick summary of where we are right now. So there's this new program that was created from the Replace Your Ride program to help encourage fleet managers, operators to make this transition. $2,500 was authorized as an incentive. And the idea was to be able to pair this with the Inflation Reduction Act, which had already created this $7,500 tax credit available for the first time, not just to for-profit entities, but also to nonprofit organizations, which include municipalities and state governments. So the idea was to be able to leverage that existing $7,500 and get up to $10,000 off the costs of a vehicle. And there were some caps that were put in place about the vehicle prices. This was allowed to go to a range of different vehicle types. So it was in part trying to pilot some different use cases for fleets, as well as to develop a used vehicle market. Most Vermonters are buying vehicles that are used. Somewhere around 76%, I think, of people are making used vehicle purchases because it's more affordable to do that. At the time, there was not much of a used vehicle market. And so the idea was to be able to invest in some of these fleets. It had a quicker turnaround, a turnover rate. So your average vehicle might be in a household for 10 years, but in a fleet that's managed to maintain vehicles to a certain level might be more like 5 or 6 years. So that was the intent. I think what we found, and we launched this program within the agency because we felt that would be the quicker way to get it out and more cost-effective way to administer it. So we launched just a few months after this was approved in July of 2023. We were able to get it off the ground in November of that year. And we saw a fair amount of interest, but I think what we found over the past sort of year and a half or so is that the eligible entities are just making decisions on a different timeline and with a different level of complexity than the individual household purchaser. You've got more entities involved, layers of approval, for example, for a municipal fleet. And the decision-making process is not necessarily as impacted by the availability of a credit or an incentive as much as it is and how this vehicle fits into a fleet's operations, how it fits into an organization's budget. And so we've seen what has been a sort of quick uptake in the beginning, slow to very slow uptake over the past probably half year or so. So the 500,000 was what was initially authorized. We still, out of that, have about 350,000 left. There was just a few thousand that were used for our own administrative funds, which include translation services and all the things that were laid out in the original authorization. But I think we're looking now at how can we get this funding out there more quickly and be more effective in assisting fleets to be able to make that electric transition. And that's where we've come to the proposal that's sort of before you now, of moving some of these funds to support Drive Electric Vermont, which has been instrumental over the past several years in being able to move the electric vehicle market here in Vermont and has been able to provide direct fleet services. So I'll stop there. Dave Roberts is here to be able to answer more questions about the work that they do with us, but I'm happy to open up to your questions now about electrify your fleet and sort of the agency's role.
I guess I have a question, and I apologize if I drifted out on some of their part, but if we make this change, and I guess the effective date won't be till July 1st or whatever it'll be, will there any existing or potential applicants, programs, or that would be impacted? Are there any that are currently or that would be proposed between now and then that we could negatively impact?
So the proposed number, I think, is 325,000. That still allows for, applications that might be trickling in this week or next to be sort of fulfilled. That amount isn't all the funding that has been spent, but the funding that's been sort of obligated. So that's under grant agreement already. So there might be some organizations, I think we've spent about 100,000 on vehicles now, but they have within their grant agreements the ability to still purchase additional vehicles.
And the funding will be available for that.
So, and this amount allows for that funding to be honored for the existing grant agreements.
Anybody else have any question? Again, thank you very much for your flexibility. I appreciate you coming in on short notice and then making you wait. So,
No problem.
And I would say the same. Welcome Dave to come up. He is available, and it's the main goal. We appreciate your quick availability and apologize for the delay in getting started today. And since neither of my sons are named Dave, I won't be able to share the same saint comment, but please, Dave, welcome back. And if you can pick us up and tell you, if we were to make this change in language and this funding were available to, what would Drive Electric, what would it most impact and help Vermonters do?
Sure. So for the record, Dave Roberts, I'm a managing consultant at BIC. We coordinate the Drive Electric Vermont program. And similar to Patrick, I provided just sort of a quick one-page letter, which is posted to the committee page. And that also includes an attachment of the prior funding request that we submitted back a month ago in February. And, essentially, the work that we do as Drive Electric Vermont spans several areas. So we have stakeholder work that's trying to work with people in the industry and in government to make sure that we sort of have the right policy and conditions to support EV adoption, make sure things are well coordinated as far as how charging infrastructure is rolling out and where those investments are happening. We also do sort of individual consultations for businesses. So we provided, I think, 35 over the past year engagements with fleet vehicles, or a lot of the inquiries are related to charging, which is sort of the first step for a lot of fleets. You need to have a place to charge the vehicles before you get them. So we'd like to continue that work, and this funding would be essential to do that. We do have the Drive Electric Vermont website, which has, I noted in my memo, about 75,000 annual visits, and we really view that as a critical way to educate people wherever they are, sort of in their knowledge of electric vehicles. It sort of gives people tools about which vehicles are available in Vermont. It was recently updated in January to include some additional resources related to business and municipal EV adoption, both vehicles and charging. We do some sort of what we'll call equity-focused outreach, so connecting with community-based organizations like Capstone, the Green Saving Smart Energy coaches, to make sure that they know how to work with their constituents. If transportation costs are a burden, thinking about how an electric vehicle might help address some of those issues. And we do support the state in a number of ways. So I think ACCD was in last week talking about their charging programs. So we've been brought in to help analyze some of the data from the grant investments that they've made, provide resources to grantees about how to set fees for charging and things like that. So we do work closely with the state to try to make sure that we have the right resources and mix of information to help advance the market. So we don't, at this point, I don't have a sort of a line item budget for how the money might be spent. The market is changing rapidly, and we want to be able to respond to what's happening at the federal level. But we do, before we would spend any of that money, we work closely with V-Trans to develop a scope of work. And we basically, work, draw down those funds monthly. So it's not like we just get the check and go off and do whatever we want. We work closely with the state to make sure that, the work that we're doing, fits with the state's needs and approach. So I don't know. I don't have much more than that. I'm happy to answer any questions or sort of dive in if folks have desire for more detail.
Anybody have any questions? Or not? No? Okay.
Yeah, maybe we asked this question before, but now we have limited incentives, federal government and us. What particular policies would you say, besides helping Drive Electric, get the information out? What particular policies do you see as like the ones to continue to push to help Vermonters make that transition?
Sure. So, charging infrastructure is obviously a critical barrier. We hear regularly from EV drivers and prospective purchasers, a need to be able to charge. It's not reliable or not reliable enough, or there's not enough opportunities near where I live. So I think, I know V-Trans is trying to figure out what's going on with the federal money and how we might continue to make some progress while that money is sort of tied up. hopefully becomes unstuck at some point this year, because while there is private investment happening, I think the state and federal support is really important to fill some of the gaps that the private market may not be able to address adequately. And similarly, the multifamily housing investments, I think, are really an important element, because we know that it's quite expensive to install charging at some of those locations if you're retrofitting. Now, we have state policy in place for new developments to make sure that they're EV ready now, but we don't have that for all the existing housing. So making sure that there is some support for that, I think, is important. I could go on, but
No,
we're-
Dave, did you have a chance to review the language that was proposed?
yes,
And you have any concerns?
no concerns.
Okay. I appreciate you very much coming in and responding so quickly and waiting for our delayed start this afternoon. And unless anybody else has any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Representative.
I'm just wondering, I don't know if it was you, but we did have one time, a couple of times, people come to the parking lot, bringing EVs,
Mhm.
people got a chance to try them out. Is that a possibility?
We have done that a couple of times over the years. It's not an annual, we haven't done it annually, and it is a fair amount of effort to pull those things together. But if there's, if there's interest, we could certainly look to do something a little bit later in the session, hopefully a little nicer weather.
Just, if it works for you. You're just
So
really-
typically, we work closely with the dealers in the area to try to get them to come out and bring some vehicles so people can actually do test drives and
Yeah,
things like that. So,
it was sort of a nice event.
yeah,
I heard that can be persuasive.
take that under advisement and see what we can do.
Unless there's another, you all set? So
No.
we'll end up at this point inviting Dana, our ledge counsel. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana and Leonard, I guess, is next up in the chair. And I suspect that we'll then also have a screen sharing that'll, take us off the piece. And I guess, given that this was the section that we heard the testimony on, I'm not sure, Dana, where exactly you were thinking of starting, or if that's where you were thinking of starting on this particular piece, or you just want to go through the entire draft, any changes since the last time that you were,
I'm happy to start there and then go back over everything else.
okay? And we're up to draft
7.1.
7.1. Last updated, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
And this had proposed language for this, which becomes now what? Or not, no, I'm sorry.
There we go. So
It becomes section 14 potentially.
it does.
Oh.
No, I don't even need to be in the chair. Just gonna, thanks for your time. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Yeah,
President Pouch has a question for you already.
Since we do have a little bit of time, I mean, even though we have covered sections and sort of agreed, oh, we think that it's good. I feel it might be good, even if you just walk through a quick, section 1, remember that's this, section 2, this. And then when we get to ones that we're questioning, then we dig into them, just to sort of walk through it quickly, I think would be helpful.
To the whole bill. You're
Yeah,
talking about, well, we can certainly consider doing that. I kind of like to follow through on where we were with
Okay.
this spot, and then we could go back and start on that. I do
that's fine.
also believe that our legislative council is at least potentially prepared if we want to walk through any of the retail delivery language, but that would be before we would be in a position to finalize the bill. So if we're going to finalize the bill, we go section by section, but I'll go ahead and
No,
we'll do this and then we'll go back and you can
That sounds
kind of
good.
quickly, we can go through and summarize each section. I'd certainly like to be responsive and whatnot,
you
but
can be on.
let's see if we can,
this is
We're okay
page
with this.
21
and then we'll look at the whole, we're not
of the.
We're not
draft.
signing off the yet.
So, for the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Section.
So I'll start with section 14. There are a couple of other minor changes in the bill, which I can highlight. I'm happy to do a quick overview of the other 13 sections. And then we do have retail delivery fee language, which is posted on the website, which I'm happy to also walk through. And I know you have the Agency of Transportation here, and they may have feedback. I don't know if we've heard anything from Department of Taxes on that at this point. They do have the language, but
And that would be the retail delivery fee. What I'd like to do though is follow that kind of step by step of what we just did in terms of while they're still in the room.
Great.
Knock section 14 out, then go back and review any other updates for 7 what'd you say, 7.1? And then we can, if the committee wants, we can go to the potential next piece. But
Yeah. So section 14 is just providing authorization to use monies that are appropriated for the Electrify Your Fleet program to continue the partnership with Drive Electric Vermont. So we don't need to transfer the monies. They're already appropriated. And so we're basically saying, in addition to the purposes of Electrify Your Fleet, you're authorized to use those monies for this purpose. And then the money shall be used for programs and activities that support increased ownership and use of plug-in electric vehicles in the state through stakeholder coordination, consumer education and outreach, infrastructure development, and the provision of technical assistance and support to Vermont municipalities and businesses desiring to electrify their vehicle fleets. So you can see some parallels with the Electrify Your Fleet program, as well as with the materials that were just presented to you by Drive Electric Vermont. The intent here was to keep the language broad while also providing some guardrails as to how this money is spent. Questions, concerns?
Representative White?
So just to clarify, so we're talking about this $325,000, which has already been earmarked for EV programs, and we can continue, and with this language, we can continue the Electrify Your Fleet program, which has this excess, but then also allow it to be used for other parts of Drive Electric Vermont.
I think if I was looking at the numbers from that Patrick showed, this is most of the money remaining in the Electrify Your Fleet program would be authorized for the use with Drive Electric Vermont. But I'll turn to Patrick or Michelle to speak to that.
And then so stakeholder coordination, consumer education and outreach, those feel, I guess I'm interested in how, I'd love to see the money go like towards getting more EVs out on the road. So I just question how much of, like, what percentage of this money would be used for stakeholder coordination, education and outreach versus infrastructure development and technical assistance and support to Vermont municipalities. I'm just looking at like soft costs and hard costs, kind of like how much would you expect to be actually putting electric vehicles on the road versus education outreach, kind of that soft stuff that goes around it. Either of you.
I'm going to defer to the experts here.
Okay.
Please go right ahead if you'd like to phone a friend, and we're phoning a friend.
So I don't know the exact percentage that we have in our contract agreement. This language is largely taken from the prior authorization in the 2022 T-bill that created the authorization for $2 million to Drive Electric Vermont. And so it was under these categories that the work largely happens. Dave can speak to like the specifics of it, but the stakeholder coordination there's quarterly meeting with all kinds of different industry participants, as well as those working within the state and at the city and utility level on electrification. There's work that happens. I think you've seen sort of the new web pages that were developed to support all the information that's become sort of the go-to source here in Vermont for consumers and businesses trying to electrify. And I think what we've seen in the Electrify Your Fleet program is that the schedules of fleet transitions and small amount of funding that we were offering, $2,500 per vehicle, isn't necessarily enough to make the transition right then. But the sort of smart investment to be making right now is in getting those organizations, the municipalities, prepared to be able to make it when their decision-making process aligns with it. So as an example, we had interest from municipal police departments wanting to try out some vehicles to see how it would fit into their fleets. Only later to be sort of have to back out of things because they didn't necessarily have the support of their select board, or they didn't, they weren't able to budget for that within their a town meeting day from their municipal budget. So we're just seeing right now in this moment, given the federal funding situation and where we are here in the state, I need to really prepare organizations, municipalities, businesses for that fleet transition, and that includes the technical assistance that Drive Electric Vermont provides around EV charging, looking at fleets and when is the best time to kind of make decisions about certain vehicles and their use types to ensure a transition over a number of years. So it's hard to, I guess, to boil it down, it's hard to compare those two things, like the direct incentive that gets the vehicle on the road versus they use soft costs, but it's really that necessary grounding that the organizations need to be able to then make that choice down the road. So it's the timing of
Yeah,
things.
they all work together. Yeah. Thank you. Dave, did you want to add anything or?
I don't have much to add. I mean, I think, obviously we prefer to spend budget on really helping people make the switch, but we also recognize that there's a lot of people in the state who are working on things and they want to be coordinated. So that's the stakeholder meetings that Patrick referenced and some of the other work. So, I would say certainly our focus is on, engaging with potential EV drivers or those who already are driving EVs to make sure they have the support they need. But definitely appreciate the ability to have those other, broader industry convenings and conversations. It's helpful.
Representative Powell?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Representative White that if we, want to, whatever funds we have, put it on hardware, but fact is, those funds are just gone, basically gone. The EV incentives statewide are basically gone. The federal basically gone, or I expect. But so with what we have, this small amount here, it allows people to go to one place and get information and because it's a confusing marketplace right now. So I think that this is a good use to help people understand, where the EV market is. And you can present information that shows, hey, even without an incentive, this is what the costs are going to be. Here's where how you get chargers if you can through your utility. Here's how you find where there's chargers in your town or in your area. So and maybe even here's go drive one. So that kind of thing, to keep going with that, I think is at this point, we would expect the incentives would run out at some point. Maybe they ran out a little sooner than we were thinking, but to keep the conversation going. And, we have the website, we have the information, we have the knowledge. and to be a place that any of us could point somebody and say, go to this website. If you look at it, I mean, it answers a lot of your questions. So I think it seems like an appropriate use of the limited funds.
Anybody else have any, Pikey, does anybody else have any questions?
I just, a technical one, I believe this was originally general fund dollars, the way this program got all started. So do we have to put this in the big bill, is what I'm saying, if we're redirecting the money now in the bill?
We're not,
Yeah,
we're not changing the appropriation, we're just adjusting the authorization.
okay, so it doesn't need to be in the big bill.
I don't think so.
I just want to make sure sometimes you had to sync up with,
This was drafted with both Logan and Chris Roop
okay,
and Luke.
yeah,
I do defer to Chris on issues of, do we need to include this in the big bill or put language in the big bill?
no, that's fine, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a technical.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the other piece to keep in mind too is this will stop in the appropriations committee. So we're already anticipating that we will be asked questions of if we have to put anything in the big bill because of this bill. One other thing to note, to Representative Pouch's recent point is it's worth noting that your neighbors on the other side here, the energy and digital infrastructure. It's like, is it energy and infrastructure? Are they downstairs now?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Gosh, I spend too much time in the transportation committees this year. I really am in a little bubble now. I used to be in like 6 or 8 committees. No, I'm enjoying it. But they are looking at the governor's affordability or climate change proposal, which includes taking surplus money. I'll call it surplus money. I don't know if that's the right term. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, no nasty comments, please. But surplus money from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and putting that into the electric vehicle incentives for the next several fiscal years. No idea whether that's going to move or get tagged onto something. They just started taking testimony. Obviously, it's after crossover, so it's going to have to find a vehicle. And there's a number of other initiatives in that bill, but it's just worth noting that that is being discussed if you're paying attention to where those funds are for those incentive programs. So, but this is the transfer language here. This would be section 14. And so it's brand new, but I'm not hearing any changes. Are there concerns with it?
Anybody have any questions on that piece? I would be looking for at some point then, unless there are questions, whether that was a shaking of the head or a thumbs up that we do want to include this in our T-bill for this year. That's a yes or a comment. There's at least
It needs
5,
to be a
6.
move, if that's a move or just a.
We've been thumbs up in the sections, I think, as we go. So we're I guess we would instruct the legislative council that we're, as a committee, agree, or at least enough shaking of the heads that we put that into the bill. And
Okay.
Representative Wells?
I just got a comment. We talk about all this, the cost of these cars and et cetera, and constantly talk over and over about getting these incentives and forcing auto dealers to sell these cars. If they just made a better product, they wouldn't need the incentives. The car dealers would be able to sell them. That's all I got.
Wow, that was an interesting sound.
Someone's trying.
Did someone keep that on purpose? No, sorry. So let's,
Not a car dealer.
I was.
let's then, I don't know if you need a minute piece or do you want to go back to the beginning?
I've gone back to the beginning.
Start the sort of any other changes from the last draft.
Yeah. So the request of the committee last time, there was question about the acronyms. So I added in the cross-reference to definition of PEV, PHEV, and BEV. Because they sound so different. So really easy to keep them separate in your head. And then renumbered in the definition section. And then so that was section 1 of the bill. In section 9, I forget who it was who noticed that I'd referenced Chittenden instead of Chittenden County. So we were really going to shrink Green Mountain Transit Authority to one municipality, but that's been corrected. So Chittenden County is now in the language.
Where are we?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Page.
That is page 10, section 9. So yeah, these are very few technical changes that we made after in response to last week's discussion of the bill. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just to back up a minute. Okay, I don't understand the difference between a plug-in electric vehicle and a battery electric vehicle.
So plug-in electric vehicle is an umbrella term. It refers to any electric, so it refers to any vehicle that has a battery that powers a motor and plugs into the wall. So a mild hybrid like the original Prius, that is not a plug-in electric vehicle. But
Because it didn't have a plug?
it didn't plug into the wall, right?
Okay.
So it didn't plug into the wall or a charger or anything like that. So, but the Prius Prime, the new one that actually has a charging port on it, that is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and also a plug-in electric vehicle, if it makes sense.
So the plug-in electric vehicle is an umbrella term that includes plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and battery electric vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. No problem. It is, until I was doing this, I would get tripped up on it all the time when I would see references to it. So,
Just add a brief comment, Dave Roberts. For our work at Drive Electric Vermont, instead of using the term battery electric vehicle, we use the term all electric vehicle. We think, even plug-in hybrids have batteries, conventional hybrids that don't plug in have batteries. So, but that is battery electric is the term that's generally used in regulation and statute. So I think it makes sense that it's used here, but just for folks' awareness, when we're out talking to the public, we use the term all electric because we think that's better.
yeah. Yeah, and then in your
AEV,
materials, you
right?
had AEV.
Yes.
Because, yeah.
And it has a battery.
Yeah, they all have batteries. So
Why'd you? use
So,
that?
even internal combustion engines have a battery. So, and you can still have an electric vehicle where if you have a bad 12-volt battery to power your accessories, your vehicle will not function. So, you still have to maintain your battery. So they're just different battery systems. And one is a much larger battery that then trickle charges that 12-volt battery on a regular schedule. 12 volts not right, is it? Either way, the car battery, is it 12 volt?
Yeah.
Okay,
Trucks
All
are
right.
24.
there we go. Thank goodness there are people who know things in this committee. Never trust a lawyer with technical details. All right, moving on. The next change here is way down. Section 12, which is on page 20. And I believe this was Representative McCoy who requested that we clarify that the mileage-based user fee is for BEV pleasure cars or AEVs, all electric vehicles. So just to clarify that, and then so that reference was added in, and then we also clarified that it's the electric vehicle infrastructure fee. I think I had additional registration fee, which was the original language before it got a name. And that is it for the changes. I'm happy to do a quick section by section highlight. I'm also happy to provide the committee with just a summary of the bill. Are you hoping to vote this afternoon, Mr. Chair?
We'll see where the conversation leads us.
Okay.
I certainly would like to, but that
Yeah.
needs to be the will of the whole committee, in my mind, to a certain degree.
So
A significant degree, or either way, without condition. So
would you prefer?
you were asked about summary of section by section, but
Sure, I can do that.
you have another comment, I suppose.
No, yeah, I think, for me, to feel like I'm ready to vote, I just, kind of go over it. I don't know, Damien, are you planning to provide a summary? Sometimes bills get an overall
I
summary.
happy to do a section by section summary. I prepare that on request for a bill like this. I'll probably prepare it for no other reason than it's often easy when you bring it to the other body and it's a long bill to provide them with a summary. So what I generally do is I'll do a summary of as recommended by the committee, if there are changes on the floor as passed by the body. And then I bring that over to the committee of jurisdiction on the other side if it's a longer bill. I've drafted the 4-page, 50-section summary of the motor vehicle bill this morning. So you'll see that when it passes the Senate. So I'm happy to do that. Something like 50, it's a lot.
Sections on,
It's a lot.
and the summary's 4 pages?
I was told by the chair there that the summary should be kept to 1 line per section to the best of my ability. So almost every section is just a single bullet point of what it does. So it's very high level.
We appreciate the preview of our future work. Right.
Yeah.
Representative Burke and then
Yeah,
Representative.
were you talking about providing that before we go to the floor?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
Yeah,
that's,
that's very, very helpful, just to.
I'll take that as a request. So,
Yes,
yeah.
make a request.
Yeah.
Thank you, it's very good, we've had that in the past and.
yeah, I would provide
And
that.
so many of us are reporting the bill.
Yeah.
It's really straightened out.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide that. I'm happy to spend time discussing the sections that you're reporting with you. If you're worried about details, I will be present on the floor if something comes up. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm there to support you through that process. So quick section summary.
Yeah, and we'll get a fiscal statement on the bill, so we'll have that before. Okay.
All right. So section 1, this adopts the transportation program, except as amended by the bill. It also provides definitions. And that's it this year. We can also include technical corrections there, but at the present time, we don't have any. Because we made the rail program technical correction in a different section because it was so involved that it didn't make sense to have it in a subsection. And so that actually is section 2, which is the rail program technical correction. This gets rid of the WACR subsidy for Barry, Berlin, Montpelier and replaces it with the White River Junction depot repairs and adjusts the proposed money going to that. Section 3 is the relinquishment of the section of Vermont Route 36 in the town of St. Albans. So this authorizes the agency to relinquish that portion of the state highway to the town. Section 4 is the beginning of our rail trails sections. So the change in section 4 is found on page 6, which is a reference to rules that are consistent with the provisions of section 3408A, which we're adopting in section 6, also starting on page 6. If you remember, section 3408A sets out prohibitions for use of the rail trails. So things like throwing, dropping, or discarding various types of rubbish, harming plants, defacing or destroying the surface of the trail or other structures on it, putting up signs, without authorization from the trail sponsor, which, as we heard, in most cases is the state. Selling things on the trail without authorization, having parades without authorization or other sorts of large events, harassing or molesting wildlife except for fishing, discharge of firearms or use of other weapons or fireworks, lighting fires, soliciting alms or contributions, using motorized vehicles except for various authorized purposes, or in relation to a mobility-related disability, or e-bikes. Yeah.
No, that number 7,
Number 7.
no, doesn't read right. Like, we're gonna harass and we can harass and molest fish.
Yeah, no, that was just right with the apparently that's a bigger conversation, yeah.
Oh, you already have.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know.
We're on the same page with that.
I mean, I guess we should, like, couldn't you just put another bullet that says fishing is allowed?
Yeah.
Say mistreating.
Oh, we're not mistreating, you're.
Yeah.
Harassing fish.
But if we're allowing fishing on the trail, is that what we're allowing? Why can't we just put a number 8, and put fishing is allowed or something, instead of you can harass and molest wildlife, except for fishing. You can do all the harassing and molesting you want.
Other fish that you can harass.
These are prohibited.
You can fit,
Harassing or molesting wildlife is prohibited, except for fish.
but I'm
Except
just
for
saying
fishing.
you're fishing, you can fish, which in some people's minds might be harassing and molesting them. But we're allowing, because you can fish, correct?
You're
Why
allowing
can't we
fishing.
just fishing is allowed, number 8, and then rename all the other ones? I don't like the wording.
How about we use?
I apologize, I've left out long time.
I don't think we'll end up reporting on the floor.
Report on the floor.
So it's worth noting that the term molesting wildlife is actually a fairly common, probably very dated legal term. It's often put into phrases. So we took out hunting and trapping because we wanted to avoid that. But you could say harming or harassing wildlife except for fishing, which,
That's what it says, right?
yeah. So harming or harassing, not harassing or molesting.
Oh, okay.
So instead of, we could change that wording slightly to get rid of the molesting, which I think is where everyone is hanging up.
I don't think it's
It's gonna be hung up on harming and molesting wildlife, except.
Oh, harming or harassing.
If you're harming, you're really harassing fish when you're fishing.
Right. And so
I
we're
mean, you wanna
saying,
catch them.
we're saying you can't harm or harass wildlife, except if you're fishing.
So you mean if I'm fishing, I can harm and harass wildlife?
No, the act of fishing, which is harming and harassing the fish,
Sorry.
is permissible.
I still think that should be a
but-
separate. Fishing is.
So this is a list of prohibitions. So we're basically caveating the prohibitions.
Okay.
So it's the following prohibited: fires, discharging firearms, using
Okay,
motorized
so-
vehicles.
Really are accepting fish.
Yeah.
Fishing. Harassing and molesting. Harassing and molesting. Because it's a given. That's what you're doing. when you're
Right.
fishing.
It's hard to catch a fish without
Harassing or molesting them.
either harassing or harming or both. Yes,
Pretty much same citizens of the animal. All right.
they have yet to figure out a hook that does not harm. But,
Okay.
uh,
Are there any other hands
What
up?
I am hearing Damien say is if he could change the terminology a little bit instead of
yeah,
testing.
in thinking about this and looking at other statutes out there that relate to the treatment of wildlife or that basically prohibit interacting with wildlife. You can go, there's everything from like the federal regulations against feeding and harassing certain types of aquatic creatures to other language which lists out 50 terms, but really what we're getting down to is you can't harm or harass wildlife on the trail. You can use the trail to get to your hunting location. You can carry a firearm but not discharge it on the trail. You can carry a bow or a crossbow but not use it on the trail. And so and already where things like trapping are prohibited within 50 feet of the used right of way. And so this is really just, we're trying to avoid an issue where we end up with misunderstanding about folks who are using the trail to either get to a place where they're setting their traps or where they're going to be hunting, but also saying you can't harm wildlife while you're actually on the trail, unless of course you're fishing off the rail bridge on the Lamoille Valley Trail or something like that.
Or the Potley River.
Yeah, or the
Yeah.
causeway in Burlington or north of Burlington, or is that? There are any number of spots there where there's good fishing along these trails, and where people currently fish.
Okay.
And
I'm good with that.
but would you like to change that to
Oh, I don't
harming,
care.
harassing or harming,
Harassing,
or should we just leave it as harassing or molesting?
Those leaders, that's the term they use.
Okay. It's there. That,
I am not reporting it, so I.
yeah. So who gets that section?
Yeah, some Representative Corcoran has some ideas.
All right,
No props.
the Transportation Board. So this is the provision here which allows the board to appoint other officers besides the chair who's appointed by the governor. So the next is the Transportation Board's powers and duties, and this is limiting the Transportation Board's duties related to appellate review of contracts, so that the agency provides appellate review relating to bids and the competitive bid process. And then the board would provide appellate review regarding disputes about the execution of the contract. Does that make sense? Okay, section 9, starting on page 10, this is the limitations on the Green Mountain Transit Authority area of operation. So basically we're saying the area of operation shall be in Chittenden County, and then it may operate outside Chittenden County, or provide demand response transit within the county. And so that provides flexibility while also clearly setting sort of the minimum operating area as smaller than it is now. Next piece there with that same section is deleting old language from the initial appointment of commissioners back in the 70s. Section 10, this is the town highway aid appropriation. So in subsection A here, we changed how we determine the inflator to make sure it includes that the 3 sections that we're now going to be attaching to inflation are excluded when we're calculating that inflation. Subsection E adds the inflator for state highway or state aid for town highway structures, and subsection H adds the inflator for the state aid program for class 2 highways. And that brings us to section 11, the mileage-based user fee. Section 11 updates the sections 27 through 29 from 2023's transportation bill. And so these were various amendments proposed by the agency to reflect the current funding situation, updates in terminology, updates on dates for when for example, the electric vehicle infrastructure fee was imposed, and and to reflect just some of the uncertainty around where the funding is going to be coming from and some of the thoughts that have already gone into determining mileage on an annual basis. Let's see, section 12 is a new intent program or intent section for the mileage-based user fee, which provides that it would be approximately equivalent to the amount collected in state and federal gas tax revenue. And then for a non-plug-in electric vehicle or the amount collected in gas tax revenue plus EV infrastructure fee for a plug-in hybrid. And then the one-time appropriation for the EV supply equipment is sending the $1.4 million from the EV infrastructure fee over to ACCD for the level 1 and 2 charging ports. And then section 14 is what we just added to transfer money from the to use money from the Electrify Your Fleet program to continue the partnership with Drive Electric Vermont. Section 15 is your effective date. That's it.
So I just have a,
Representative Paul?
so, you know, that when we were back on mileage-based user fee, was an effective in July 2026. Does that have to be noted here or not?
Let's see.
Is it effective July 1, 2026?
Yep, it says that we would begin collecting revenue on July 1,
So
2026.
do I have to put that in the end of this bill? An effective date or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So we say commence collecting. The language is already effective, though.
Okay, just
So-
double check.
I will double check the original language though, just to make sure I haven't missed something.
Matt,
Phone a friend, huh?
Just to clarify, so the language is providing some direction to the agency to implement by July 1, 2026. That effective date would be in next year's transportation bill or whatever form it takes next year. This is just making what we have to bring back to you all effective July.
thank you.
Representative Powell?
It's in, I guess it's directly on this. So, this bill that's coming out of the House now, and, assuming it moves forward, is based on the best information we have on federal funding availability. And I guess it's possible we'll get more information in the next 6 weeks, and the Senate would then possibly, adjust accordingly, I suppose. So that could happen anytime, but, we're kind of holding off. We're just kind of seeing on some of the federal money, if that comes forward or not.
I would comment at least on one specific part of that general, just if you happen to be in mileage-based user fee portion of the discussion.
Yeah.
We had to, we have people that can help us for that, but the grant that was gonna put $3 million to do the program and do the outreach, the education, the work with the inspection stations, et cetera, DMV, all of that is on a 90-day review hold. Our best information at least what I've been told anyway, is that it's very unlikely that we're going to get it, but it has not been actually fully canceled. So when I'm having conversations with appropriations, I'm saying we'd really like $3 million to move it ahead, but it's not technically killed yet. And that 90 days will happen sometime in May. And we don't want to spend, I'm telling, this is a tough one. You try to, you're going to ask people to spend state money that we still have some chance that we're going to get federal money for. And it puts us in a spot other than making it clear we want this to happen because there's $5 or $6 million annually in collections in fee and whatnot in tax that that's already been passed. That's already agreed that that's going to happen, that we're going to do that as soon as the EVs hit 15%. And we're at that stage, but we're in a tough spot to ask appropriations to give us state money to do a thing that we're not 100% certain yet, but very close that we're not going to have federal money for. So I agree with your sentiment overall, Representative Pausch, that part of this is passing along that we may or may not learn more about in the Senate. And I am really trying to set the stage that that conversation, that money will happen if we know more, when that part of the lease, that we know more, as far as real specific money that we want. Because that kind of sums up the overall position, I believe, where we are on that particular piece. Please go ahead.
And I'll just, I see Logan's here and, you know, the 5 million or 6 million, you know, I'm not sure where we got that number, but I remember talking with Logan one time in the hallway and saying roughly how much you think it'll be, and it was, you know, roughly 5 million. That was before we said, hey, let's put the federal money in there. It might be, and I'm looking at Logan, if it's possible to sort of come up with, hey, what's the estimate? If it indeed started the end of, in July, 2026, what do we expect that first, do we have a number for what that first year would bring in?
For the record, Logan McGregor, the Joint Fiscal Office. So that original number was based off of the funding study that the agency put together, and you heard that. I believe that used a 30-cent. Maybe I'm misremembering now. Anyways, they used a set of criteria to determine that, right around $5 million range, I believe it was. But to answer your question, yes, we could determine that. I don't have that off the top of my head. We have to go back and look at sort of what was used in determining that number in the study to come up with what the new estimate might be.
I gotta assume the estimate will be more,
I would
because we added more of the thing that was.
Unless you,
No,
if you
Sure.
want to jump in again.
We used 32 cents, I believe, was at the time what the gas tax rate was. If you just, you know, 18 cents is the federal rate, so it's just simple 1.5 times.
Yes.
What was estimated out, that's what you probably end up for your number. So if we were to be at, you know, say 5 million by the time it's implemented, we might be seeing more like 7.5 million.
I feel it would be good to maybe, you know, ask Logan to, you know, hey, go through those numbers that were presented initially and maybe update them so that when we talk about it, we can talk about what we expect for revenue based on where we are now.
So may I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
So I'm just want to clarify the numbers we're referencing are based on the transportation funding study that was submitted in January, right?
We have 2 studies. One was transportation funding study, and it's a prior year report.
Okay,
Legislative report that submitted in January 2020.
okay.
that
Okay.
Looked at.
Oh, that looked at this too.
Looked at.
Okay.
The mileage-based user fee implementation.
Okay, and was that looking at for just EVs or was it looking at it for all light duty vehicles under?
EVs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that because the study in January, which I think you guys had that was a consultant that wrote that.
They looked at both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it referenced light duty vehicles and that just wanted to make sure that we weren't accidentally inflating our amount by looking at more vehicles than would actually be covered. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments about either this section or the entire bill review?
I'm all for this, for the mileage-based user fee. And I did speak the other day of some unfairness about it, you know, to our own residents. I was kind of thinking the other day, like, say I had an electric vehicle and I decided to go to Florida, take a ride to Florida. Am I gonna pay that mileage-based user fee based on the miles I drive to Florida, which isn't even in the state? I don't know, and we were talking, it's a tough thing. I couldn't think, I was trying to, how can I help out by thinking of some sort of way of solving this? I don't think of any way other than software. How you're gonna, well, the government kind of needs to do the mileage-based user fee, I think. I don't see. It looks like we're being unfair to our residents. That's the only thing I got to say about it, but I mean. I guess that's it. I just kind of, have a little bit of a fairness issue with it. I don't know what everybody else thought.
Can I represent what?
Yeah, I think Representative Casey is identifying, there are gonna be a couple of challenges that Patrick and your team are gonna have to overcome. Cause I think, so, so a question I have, like, and maybe you've covered this before, the mileage-based user fee right now is intended for battery electric vehicles. And plug-in electric vehicles are not included at this time.
Plug-in hybrid.
Excuse me, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. But is that the intention for always, or is that kind of like, would that be a phase two? And then also just seeing that, looking at trying to have a fee for the level 3 chargers. I think this was brought up before. If people are paying a mileage-based user fee and they're getting charged a level 3, they're double paying. So there's a couple challenges there that I assume your team will have to work out if we get the money to go through, but.
And I do believe we've heard in the testimony all along that if we don't start, we're not going to get in a spot to fix them. And I would say that I recall that there was a pretty strong message that what we're trying to address is that electric vehicles need to help pay for roads and bridges. And we've heard pretty strongly that they expect to pay for roads and bridges, but we haven't found a perfect system to do that. Neither has, from what I gather, any other state yet. But we are committed to moving forward, and that law has already been passed that says over 15% new or electric vehicle registrations that we're going to do something. So we're trying to find a way to make sure that we do that. But it's been pretty clear that we do not know the answers to every piece of the question, is what I've thought that I've heard in the testimony. But I do feel pretty compelled that we have to move forward. We have to find some of those answers. But we also need to make sure that we're going in that direction. Representative Powell?
Yeah, I mean, previous years, we've had testimony, I think Patrick's given testimony that, if we start to put a tax on the high level charges, you can't do it for people who are in Vermont. They've already paid their share. So there's some challenges moving forward. This is, I think, considered like a step forward. And then, hey, how do we capture the other pieces or fix the other pieces? And I know the New England states or some of the states around us have had discussions. I think our agencies on those discussions saying, hey, how do we do it as a region so that we're capturing, people come with EVs into Vermont and they were not. And so all those, are things to work out. And same with Representative Casey's point. If you drove through Vermont, you might fill your gas tank here, but you're not going to make it. If you drove to Florida, you might fill your gas tank here, but you're not going to make it to Florida without paying, Delaware's tax and Florida's tax. So, yeah.
I took my electric vehicle to Florida. I'd have to pay the full mileage when I got back.
That's true,
I had to
right.
pay the full mileage that I
Yeah.
didn't drive in Vermont.
Yeah, but you haven't paid federal tax while you're out here, and you
So,
probably haven't paid.
Welcome
state
to the
tax.
difficulties of
Yeah.
making a law. Welcome, we're trying to pass a law here today. I'm trying to make sure we do get to that and look at the difficulties that it is, and then we get into rules on top of that, because we didn't set the rate and we have lots of pieces that we aren't finalized on it. But I think, have agreed that we have to move forward. Other sections or questions? I have a couple things that I want to get to, but
Well, are we gonna discuss the delivery?
and that's one of the parts that we have to look at. I want to what I'd like to do is make sure, my understanding from all the head nods and all of these sections, if they're there, that the committee is, at this point, for these pieces, pretty well moved along, that we're at that spot. So for that, I look around, I see a pretty solid, that what I also have been asked, and like the last section, it was just added, it was member driven, there has been a request that was made on Friday about retail delivery vehicle, there has been some draft language, retail delivery fees, there has been some draft language. We do have some time in the committee, I am willing to explore it, I am not gonna pass the judgment on it until we've explored it, but I would certainly we want to highlight this issue, we have brought it up multiple times. There is some level of language there, I defer to you, Representative Couch, if you'd like to expand
Yeah.
upon that.
Thanks. Yeah, so Damien did drop some language. It's, maybe not perfect. And it certainly isn't enough time now. It's clear we should get more testimony on the delivery fee. Even if it's just to queue it up. We would, and that's what I've been saying, tee it up for our next year. I just don't think we're quite ready there. And while we have some language, it would be hard. I personally don't think we're ready to push it into this T-bill. I think once we get the T-bill out, we could start having, some testimony and discussions on it. Because I think it's, again, the second item in the study that said these are potential revenues. And it seems like a reasonable revenue, particularly if we focus it into the municipalities that are being impacted from it.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we put something in here, it gives the Senate something to work on. They might be able to have more time to, I just feel like, time is ticking away and we need other sources of revenue.
Yeah.
And so at least to get a foothold somewhere, get established, like this is what we're thinking about. I don't know if we would need a lot of testimony on that, just to say that we shall explore the possibility of what this would look like. That just, I just feel like we talk about so much about you get more revenue that the sort of, I would prefer to move ahead in some fashion. Maybe it's good to talk to the Senate, see how they're feeling about it. And find out what their thought is on it. Is that going to be fruitless if we put something in there? Are they just going to sort of throw it out, or are they going to take it and do a little bit more with it? I don't know.
Representative McCoy had your hand up, and Representative White?
Just gonna say in my short 6 years on this committee, we've worked really hard on a lot of things and put it in the bill, and the Senate just mix it up. So something that isn't even really baked in this committee yet. They're just gonna pull it. They pulled things that we worked hard on the last several years. And this is like the first time the committee at 20 of 3, the day or the day before, we're passing out a T-bill. I would hesitate to do that.
Well, we haven't even seen what the language is, but
Oh,
I know.
you have it on, is it?
Oh,
We'll just refer the language.
we haven't
I
even
think
looked
so.
at it. But Representative, yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have commented. Burke, when Representative White, you're up next, and then back to Representative Burke.
A comment and a question. My question is unrelated to our current conversation, but do we not need any language in the T-bill regarding the JTOC pullback?
It's in the big bill.
That's in the
That's
big
in-
bill. Okay,
Yep, that's,
that was an easy answer. And then on the package delivery fee, I think we do have some language in that kind of longer omnibus bill that a couple of the representatives shared. I think we looked at it last week or the week before. So I would be supportive of it, at least taking a look at the delivery fee language as a group and seeing whether we think it's too much to take on given our limited time, or whether
where's the hold?
Representative Burke, you had your hand up.
I was just gonna say, that's why I think it's worth just having an informal conversation with the Senate to say, hey, we're thinking about this. Is this something you're interested in, or would you just throw it out? I just get a little, take the temperature of what's happening, because I think I think I've gotten information that they're sort of open to the idea. But, that's all I know.
Representative Casey, you're up next.
I think it's time to move on. I think if we're getting down to the witching hour, let's move along. We can figure out the delivery fee later. And besides, I personally feel like adding more to people's budgets is probably where we shouldn't be. I don't see where I'm not seeing big Mack trucks drive up my road to deliver stuff for Amazon. I'm seeing a courier van, is what I'm seeing. So I don't know where these big trucks are that are wear and tearing on the roads from Amazon, but I'm just not seeing them in my area. And so personally, I'm not even into the idea of putting any more tax on goods that we order. I just not. I think things are expensive enough as it is, and we need to get moving along. That's my 2 cents. Or cent and a half, whatever you want to call it.
Representative Lau?
Yeah, I would say, I feel very differently given the uncertainty about, federal resources coming our way to help that we can then pass on to our towns, or make resources available to our towns to maintain roads. We had a bunch of people who were unhoused, who came to the State House today, and the one group was introduced as finding themselves in this predicament due to flooding. And I wondered if the road conditions were a contributing factor to that. We've certainly heard that is a problem in a lot of our other municipalities, particularly, places with, narrow valleys and slopes. So, I'm looking for ideas to create more sources of revenue in these very uncertain times. So I don't, slowing the process for doing that, regardless of where we land on this, doesn't seem like the right thing to me.
Representative Q?
So as I understand it, this fee wouldn't be available. We wouldn't institute it for another year and a half. Is that true?
Potentially.
Okay, well, all right. I guess I gotta say, we haven't even seen language or reviewed it yet, or done any of in terms of walking through or heard any additional pieces on it. So whatever comments you have about it, it would be a bit speculative that the concept we have talked about multiple times, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or overstepping you. I haven't made it clear that we took testimony on. Maybe I should wait till you're done and I'll go from there.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. So the point is, there isn't anything gained by being expedient, because it's not going to happen for a year and a half. And it's better to have this thing well-researched and well-written instead of just saying, oh, anyway, that's my fear. Thank you.
Just a sec. I got you. Here, it's all yours. Go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
While I, you've heard me say, I think I want to really look into this. I think it impacts municipalities like in Heinsberg, our dirt roads. But Representative Casey's very clear. We haven't heard that it has. So there's some testimony that we would need to get that says, hey, how is it impacting our particularly more rural roads and our dirt roads? What's the truck traffic? Even though they're not Mack trucks, but they go by my house several times a day. So, how much is there? And then exactly what that's, Damien and I were talking through email, like, is it just whatever's collecting sales tax? And that would have that 30-cent fee and exactly where, where it would go. Is there a minimum size of a company? In other words, small Vermont companies that are under, just say $1 million don't have to add that fee. I certainly wouldn't want to see it on groceries or pharmaceuticals or things that people absolutely need. So I just think there's a lot to sugar out. And while I want to move forward, I'd like to move forward and get all that information we can. And then at that point, make a decision, and based on the information we have, being able to sell it to others that are unsure about it and say, here's why. I'm not quite sure we're there yet. I wish we were, but we're not. I don't think, in my opinion.
Representative Thompson, did you have the first, or you had your hand up? And then.
Thanks. I just wanted to note there were a number of studies over the past several years that have been looking at solutions to identifying to our declining transportation fund, and this was identified in multiple, which has been said, but there are, we have a lot of resources on how other states have done this. A lot of pros and cons have been weighed, and so I think taking some type of step of at least starting to consider or invest time in what would the framework look like for Vermont, what would the recommendations be, taking it a step further would be valuable, because in this situation, I think not taking action is making a really definitive decision that we're not going to be taking steps towards generating the revenue that we need in order to fully fund our transportation program. And that this, if we're waiting, we're making a consequential decision that will impact the resources that we have available in order to support the transportation program that we need to support across the state. So I would love to see some way. I don't think we have the testimony to make a decision if we're implementing this fee or not, but at least to take the step beyond the studies of looking at in more depth at what this might look like for Vermont in order to prepare us to get closer to making a decision on whether or not to implement it.
So this fee that we're talking about, is this going to include FedEx? Is it include UPS? Any little courier that delivers anything? I mean, to sit there and just single out Amazon, that's what I keep hearing is Amazon. It seems like we got to go after every carrier that makes a delivery. That's what it sounds like to me. Otherwise, I think you'd wind up in court.
This is not to that detail. This is asking the AOT and the tax commissioner to consider all of these things and present what would be a possible delivery.
So it's going to have to include all those that I just said.
Yeah.
I would say that all of those would be things that need to be addressed in terms of when and if we did build a lot. So we're not on the time part yet, unless I guess I would say, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the language for a second
Sure.
on the retail delivery fee. I guess I'll try to put my position on it. We have talked about, if I could remind you back to where we started the committee, that I talked about a sort of a timeline across that the T-bill had to come through, and there are milestones along the edge where we get to now, which is pretty much at a spot where it has to go and be crossed over. And we talked about on the outside of that, a big huge circle of illustrating to all of the members of the House that we have a revenue problem in transportation. And then we have a declining revenue or flat and declining revenue, and to educate the committee and then all of the legislature of where our money, where the transportation revenue comes from. And that taking money out of transportation, like with the JTOC transfer and the purchasing use tax, and taking money out of transportation and having backfilled with general fund money over the last X number of years, we have this huge issue of funds. As we came through the time frame of the T-bill, we took testimony on the gasoline tax, the diesel tax. We took testimony on, to a degree, on the retail, on the multiple options that have been studied, retail delivery fee being one of them. We discussed about digging further into retail delivery fee. We took testimony on mileage-based user fee. We took testimony on the amount of money that went out on JTOC, and we got a win, we believe, in terms of that $20 million not leaving. And we've driven the discussion into where we could get more money for mileage-based user fee program. We've driven the discussion into, I've even heard discussions about and potential pieces about limiting the purchase and use tax, or potentially stepping it down over time to reduce the amount of money that goes out. And we want to push, and you'll hear it in the presentation when the bill does get to the floor, that our next goal is making sure to keep all transportation dollars in transportation, meaning let transportation pay for transportation. That's where we're trying to go. In that whole process, we also heard part of the reason to pursue retail delivery fees and an increase in the gas tax would be to help our towns. And we found a way to at least see the escalator that it's be reviewed to bring that money into town. So we've been moving on a date line, and every request for members by members, I almost every request, there are still 2 or 3 on the list that didn't need to come in yet for the T-bill, but every member request for testimony has been honored and brought through into the committee at this point through that timeline. Every single request for any testimony has been honored. We've had people in a wide range of viewpoints on transportation, from children and students to coming in to people talking about, on the other side, clean car things, to people talking about advocacy groups for the Red Cross and the American Cancer Society. We've had testimony in a wide range as we move down that timeline. At no point did we not cover testimony that was asked for, keeping the entire conversation about the bigger picture of transportation revenue. So we're now at a spot where everybody has pretty much agreed with what we have, but I also believe that we've tried to highlight that retail delivery fee or some other revenue issue has to be on the discussion. And we've taken discussion about other pieces. For the committee to include language, there has to be a presentation of language. If the committee wants to include language that says something about how we want to move forward with retail delivery fee, we can do that by taking additional testimony. We can do that by reviewing this language moving forward. But in order to get it into this T-bill, I cannot take something that starts out the Commissioner of Taxes in consultation without having the Secretary of Transportation, without having the Commissioner of Taxes or their representatives, or the Secretary of Transportation, their representatives, immediately come in and tell me what this means to them, what kind of effort we're talking about. So I really want to be clear that the members work towards retail delivery fee and the gasoline fee and the mileage-based user. I'm on board with that huge conversation of we need additional revenue. But we need to do as a chair a significant amount of work to get through that. So I can't feel like we can go forward on this, even though I fully agree and have been driving the conversations about revenue in multiple places. So that's where I'm sitting at. If there is a proposal of language somewhere that we could include, somebody would have to draft that. And that somebody means either members or members working with our legislative council or our Commissioner of Taxes or our agency. So I'm still very willing to go through the language, but I would need a list of witnesses that would, there are sections of this law that are way outside of our lane that are mentioned just in the first paragraph. As a first-time chair in a spot, I fully appreciate the work and the concept. And I believe and agree that we have to continue to drive the conversation about revenues. And I am very willing to give committee time to do that. But my number one job, back to the speaker, is to give a T-bill that everybody could agree on. 11-0 was our goal. I think we're there. We want to do more. I don't know how. I'm willing to continue to use committee time after the T-bill in any other way that you've asked, just as we've allowed every testimony in from anybody that's asked to highlight that bigger discussion. So you certainly have my commitment there. I don't know how. I'm looking for a way to move forward at this point.
So you're making a motion to include it?
No, I don't think so. I hope that I wasn't too harsh on that piece. I'm in favor of driving the conversation and have been the whole time related to revenue, but I can't do this yet. So I'm sorry, Representative White.
No, I just have a suggestion. So we have until 3:45, is that correct?
The agenda is open until 3:45.
So
Yeah.
my suggestion would be that we take the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes to just have Damian walk us through the language that he came up with for H426 regarding the retail delivery fee. And we can, and best case scenario, if there's support, is could we come up with some intent language, just very general, very short, to just signify this is something that we feel like has merit. We need time to dig in, but just something that kind of earmarks it in the transportation bill. If people feel like that is too moving too quickly, then I think the backup would be we don't put anything in. But at least, maybe we can talk through this and maybe it'll be simpler than we thought, but if intent language, which would maybe be a couple sentences, would at least put something in the ground. I would love to see that if people, agree.
Direction was.
Following up on what Representative Lally said, finding new ways to generate revenue. I'd like to see that in a discussion here. After all, we all know we were all elected because of our giant brains. And so we should, as homework, be able to go home tonight and the next day or so, come back, everybody, with a formative plan to generate more revenue. Yes.
I think this is the plan, but getting back to your.
And we've seen a number of stuff.
Yeah, I think philosophically, I personally would be opposed to just even including intent. Intent is making a statement on behalf of the committee that this idea, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, that it's, we're moving it to the next level. And I just think there's a lot of unknowns. We haven't got the chambers in, we haven't got the Vermont, business community in, we haven't gotten the tax commissioner in. I mean, you can go on, and for sort of even to include that in the bill without giving that at least broad testimony, I think would be unfair. At the end of the day, I 100% agree. I mean, we have to think outside the box. We have declining revenues and we have to replace it. There's no doubt. But unfortunately, the way this played out, the timing of it, it's just not suited. I think the chair is committed to this committee once this bill is out, and we will have time. If the prognosticators are right, we're going to be here for a little bit. So we're going to have plenty of time to fill the schedule. And we can start, as Representative Powell says, start teeing it up for next year. But I would have a major heartburn even putting a 10 language, because that's sort of like somewhat of a stamp of approval that, we're moving forward an idea that hasn't even been vetted. So leave it at that. But feel free to walk through.
Take on that useless effort.
Representative Powell?
Yeah, I mean, so I sort of feel the same thing, I don't wanna have to defend something when, I don't have the information to defend it with. And I think it'd be fine to walk through it with a caveat that says, this is not it. This is just some language around, things that get considered, things that, would need to be vetted to move it forward. So, I don't want anybody to think, like, this is exactly what I was looking for. But it certainly covers it all, so.
How about,
Could this be a standalone bill?
not now?
At this point.
I mean,
So, no, I
it's-
mean, next year.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought you meant now.
So it's also worth noting, anytime you're dealing with taxes, it has to go to Ways and Means, it has to go to Finance, so it's a four committee thing, and when it's not just changing a couple of fees, when you're talking about creating a new tax structure, they will take their time with it. So if you could move this as a standalone bill now, it could sit on the wall in Ways and Means through the end of the session and into next year, because they may be too busy with education stuff. So that's just, it's not my job to tell you guys what to do, just to point out that there are, these are the potential things that can bog down a bill. But there's nothing that prevents you from sending a bill out even at like the end of April or May that, we'll just get held up in rules on the other side. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
There isn't a standalone bill that anyone has introduced, is there, like on the Senate side, do you know?
No, there's the Senate equivalent to H 426, which has a retail delivery fee in it. So there is language on the Senate side. There's nothing that prevents them from taking something like this up and taking testimony on it. I would have to look at, there is a deadline for committees to introduce committee bills. And so that you may also run up against this session. There's nothing that prevents you from doing work on this. There's also nothing that prevents you from, I know traditionally the T-bills have not done the ping pong back and forth to the maximum number of amendments, but there's nothing that prevents you from getting the Senate version back and sending it back with one more amendment. Strategy might prevent you from doing that, given that it's a big bill and it needs to pass, but there's nothing theoretically that prevents you from doing that. No.
I'm gonna suggest we take a break. We've been in here a couple hours, and we will reconvene at 3:15 and resume our committee discussion and possible vote.